Yeah, welcome guys. Today we'll start discussing about small volume parenterals. Actually, what are parenterals? So any formulation or any dosage form which is bypassing the enteric route is generally termed as parenteral. So parenterals are basically divided into two types: small volume parenterals and large volume parenterals. So in this class we will see in detail about small volume parenterals, right? So para means basically outside and entero means intestine. So the route which bypasses the intestinal route is basically called as parenterals. Any drug or fluid whose delivery does not utilize the alimentary canal for entry into the body tissues is generally termed as parenterals. Drugs applied topically, right, or drugs intended to be used in ears, right, or to be applied on the skin or inhaled through the nose or nostrils, right, or to be applied in the eye are generally comes under parentals. Parental products are injected through the skin or mucosal membrane into the internal body compartments. Then these are the preparations which are given other than oral route. So all these are the different ways of explaining the parentals. Single term, if you want to understand, split the word. Para is outside, bypassing enteral route is bypassing the intestinal route or enteric route. So all those routes of administration which bypasses your complete enteric canal, it basically comes under parentals. It can be the drugs which are supposed to be applied on your skin, like all the transdermal drug delivery, or which are instilled into your ears, or which are supposed to given in your eyes, or which are inhaled. All these things comes under parenterals. Right, so in this class we will see about the definition of parenteral according to USP, especially about small volume parenteral. Then we'll see the brief introduction, then advantages, limitations, routes of administration, different administrations in parenterals, manufacturing of small volume parenterals, then packing, sterilization, quality control test, quality assurance, and then we'll conclude this class. Right. So according to United States of Pharmacopoeia, what is a parenteral? An injection or an injectable that is packed in a container labeled as containing 100 ml or less generally comes under parenteral. See, we discussed many dosage forms and many formulations. All of them are classified depending on one or other factor. And like we have discussed about the capsules in recent class, hard and soft gelatin capsules are basically two types, and hard and soft are the classification based on the consistency of the gelatin. If the gelatin is hard, we are calling hard gelatin capsule. If gelatin is soft and smooth, we are calling it soft gelatin capsule. In the same way, the parenterals are not divided into some, are not classified depending on all those physico-chemical properties, but they are divided depending on the volume. 100 ml and below 100 ml are small volume parenterals. Above 100 ml comes under large volume parenterals. So you can see ampules, vials, cartridges, and all syringes comes under small volume parenterals. Let's see the introduction. All the sterile products packed in vials, ampules, just I said, cartridges, syringe bottles, and any other container that is 100 ml or less than 100 ml comes under small volume parenterals. Ophthalmic products which are packed in squeezable plastic containers, although topically applied to the eye rather than administering by injections, also falls under classification of small volume injections or small volume parenterals. As long as these containers size is less than 100 ml or equal to 100 ml, they will fall under small volume parenterals. SVPs or small volume parenterals, aqueous solutions can be administered by intravenous routes because because of local irritation. Small volume parental products can be formulated and packed in several ways and are included in wide variety of products. Like pharmaceutical products can be involved in it, included in it, biological products, diagnostic agents, allergenic extracts, radiopharmaceutical products, dental products, genetically engineered biotechnological products, liposomes, and lipid products. All these comes under small volume parenterals. Basic characteristics of small volume parenterals. Let's see what should be the basic characteristics of small volume parenterals. First thing, they should be sterile. They should be sterile and they should be free from pyrogens. What are pyrogens? These are the bacterial endotoxins which can elevate the body temperature. Then they should be free from any particulate gritty matter. So these three should be are basically the basic characteristics of small volume parenterals. So any small volume parenteral, it may be a biological product, it may be pharmaceutical product, it may be diagnostic agent, allergenic extract, radiopharmaceutical product, right? Or dental product, or genetically engineered, or biotechnological product, liposome, lipid product, any product which comes under class of parenteral should be sterile, should be free from pyrogens, and should be free from particulate matter. So all the products must be sterile, all the products must be free from the pyrogen contamination, and injectable solutions must be free from visible particulate matter. This includes reconstituted sterile powders also. Let's see the advantages of small volume parenterals. So quick onset of action is possible because, like when we compare it with the tablets and capsules, there is no need of disintegration, dissolution, even absorption step was being removed. So directly when you're giving it into the blood, basically, or at the site of action, the onset of action is comparatively high when we compare it with the tablets, syrups, and other type of formulation, suitable for drugs which are not administered by oral route. Then useful for unconscious patients and the patients who have the vomiting issues. Say continuously diarrhea patients, they're continuously vomiting and you can't give the drug orally, then you can give it parenterally. An unconscious patient can't take the tablet directly in, so you can give it him through parenteral route. Useful for the patients who cannot take drug orally, especially for the pediatrics and geriatric patients. For the pediatric patients, they are like they don't want to take the tablets and they'll create a lot of ruckus and havoc when they're taking the tablets, right? So we can simply give the injection, insert them. And for the geriatric patients, they can have the choking problem and or other kind of things. So it is useful for those patients who cannot take the orally, and useful for emergency situations. As we discussed, the onset of action is high, or quick onset of action is there. In emergency situations, you can't wait until tablet goes, disintegrates, then dissolves, then absorbs into blood, then go to the site of action or to the receptor and show the action. Instead of that, we can directly give it to the blood. So in emergency situations, parenteral route is the best. The duration of action can be prolonged by modifying formulation. So if we can modify the formulation even in the parenteral route, even though the quickest onset of action is there, we can prolong the duration of action. Then it can be done by, and it can be done in hospitals, ambulatory infusion centers, and home and healthcare professionals also, right? Then you have the disadvantages and limitations. For us. Then you have disadvantages and limitations also. The major disadvantage of the parenteral is pain, right, on the injection. So when we give the pain, yeah, so when you take the parenteral, you will feel pain. It is associated with the pain. That's the major problem. Second, it's difficult to reverse an administered drug effect. Then sensitive to allergic reactions at the site of injection. Then requires strict control of sterility and non-pyrogenicity than other formulations. So you need to maintain these formulations free from pyrogens, and strict control of sterility is one of the limitation. An only trained person can give. If you compare it with any other dosage form, there is no need of a skillful or trained person to give. But in parenterals, you have to give intravenously, intraperitoneally, intrathecally, right, intradermally, you need a skilled person who can give you the parenteral. Then required specialized equipments, then devices and techniques to prepare and also to administer the drug. So even this was a limitation, because when you're taking a syrup, simply you will measure accurate quantity and you can take it. Or if you're giving a tablet also, you can simply take it. No need of special equipment, special devices to use. But for parenterals, you need special devices, right, to use them and also to prepare them and to administer them, and more expensive and costly when compared to other products. So these are the limitations. So let's see what are those. It is associated with the pain, difficult to reverse the administration, because by mistake, if you have taken the wrong pill, you can vomit it, right? You can remove it from your GI tract. But when you are giving wrong injection, when it's dissolving in the blood, it's difficult to reverse it. And sensitivity of the allergic reactions at the site of action. This is not in the case of tablets and capsules, but you will see in the parenteral. and requires the strict control of sterility, and pyrogen free system should be there, and only trained and skillful person can give the parenteral, uh, can administer the parenteral, and requires specified equipments, devices, techniques to prepare the drug. So students, these are the limitations and disadvantages of parental. Let's see what are the different routes of administration. I hope you have understood what is the definition. In definition, we are simply saying that any formulation which is bypassing the enteric route or elementary canal and which comes or falls below 100 ml capacity or 100 ml capacity is generally termed as a small volume parenteral, right? So it can be cartridges, injections, right? All those things comes under it. Then route of administrations, we have different route of recording. We have different routes of administration. The primary route of parental administrations are commonly employed. Subcutaneous route, intramuscular route, intravenous routes. These are the most common routes of administration for parentals. Then we have the other routes like intraarterial, intrathecal, epidural, then intracardial, right, intrapleural, intradermal. All other routes are also there. So these are the different routes of administrations in parental. Students, please take a screenshot so that you can remember all these things. Then formulation of SVPs, formulation of small volume parental. So what is included in the formulation of small volume parental? Let's see what different vehicles we use to formulate the small volume parentals. So coming to first thing, vehicles are again divided into two types here: aqueous vehicles and non-aqueous vehicles. In aqueous vehicles, we have water for injection, sterile water for injection, bacteriostatic water for injection. So these are the different type of aqueous vehicles used in the preparation of small volume parenterals, right? So let's see what is water for injection. So water for injection is the water which is suitable for to be used in preparation of parenteral. So generally water for injection means that water which is free from pyrogens, the water which we are removing the pyrogens which are suitable for utilizing as a vehicle. So the preparation method and everything we'll discuss in coming classes, and water for injection as per USP should be used. Then sterile water for injection is the water for injection or in water which is not only free from pyrogens but also sterilized, but also present bacteria and all other pathogens are being killed or sterilized. Then bacteriostatic water for injection is the water which is free, not only free from pyrogens but also added bacteriostatic agents are there. It means further there is no chance that other pathogens or bacteria can contaminate that water. So these three are the aqueous vehicles which we generally used in preparation of parentals. Then non-aqueous vehicles, when your formulation have an issue with the water, or they are hydrophobic in nature, or there are problems like oxidation and other kind of things, we'll go for non-aqueous vehicles. So in non-aqueous vehicles we have different oils. Basically we can use all vegetable oils like peanut oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, sesame oil, soybean oil, ethyl oleate, and isopropyl myristate. So these are non-aqueous vehicles which are generally used in formulation of small volume parentals. Then let's see what are the additives of small volume parentals. Commonly used anti-bacteriostatic agents we commonly use, right? Then in buffers we use, and tonicity adjusters we use. In antibacteriostatic agents we use basically phenyl mercuric nitrate and thimerosal, and its percentage of just 0.01%. Then benzalkonium chloride is also commonly used as an antibacterial agent, which is used in the percentages of 0.01%. Students, please note down these excipients. These are very important. Then phenol or cresol is commonly used in the percentage of 0.5% and less than that, and chlorambutanol is commonly used 0.5%. Then we use buffers basically to maintain the pH, right? So what is buffer, right? This is it's a mixture of substance which prevents change in pH, slight change in pH on addition of weak acid or weak base. So citrate and acetate buffers are generally used. Sodium benzoate and benzoic buffer can be used. Sodium titrate or tartaric acid, sodium tartarate and tartaric acid buffer is used, and phosphate buffer generally used as a buffering agents here. Then tonicity adjustment is very, very important in the parenterals, because if the formulation is not isotonic, what is isotonic, what is hypertonic and hypotonic? I hope you know about osmolarity and osmotic pressure, right? So the given formulations, osmolarity or osmotic pressure should be equal to the yes, to the blood plasma if you are giving parenteral route, or to the lacrimal secretions if you are using in ocular drug delivery, or they should be equal to the nasal secretions if you are using in inhalers, or if you're using in nasal drops and other things. So wherever depending on site of action, right? So the isotonicity of the site of action, the what can we say, osmotic pressure of the site of action and osmotic pressure of the formulation should be same. And to maintain that tonicity, we can include sodium chloride and potassium chloride as tonicity adjusters. Then we can use surfactants, chelating agents, and we also use inert gases. Why we use inert gases like nitrogen and carbon dioxide? Because on the head space available after packing in the small volume parenteral, maybe in the cartridge or vial or ampule, if oxygen is present there, or a presence of air can cause oxidation for certain drugs like ferrous containing drugs, copper containing drugs, and all those things. So we will fill it with nitrogen or carbon dioxide, which are inert gases, right? Even though carbon dioxide is not inert, but basically the reactivity is less and it will prevent the oxidation there. Then chelating agents like EDTA is commonly used as a chelating agent in our formulation. Then coming to surfactants, we use surfactants basically in order to improve the wetting angle, right? So in order to reduce the wetting angle, improve the wetting and solubility of our formulation. So polyoxyethylene, sorbitol monooleate, and sorbitan monooleate, are the different surfactants commonly used in small volume parenteral. So let's see what are the excipients: antibacterial agents, buffers, tonicity adjusters, surfactants, chelating agents, and inert gases. Along with it, coming to vehicles, aqueous vehicles and non-aqueous vehicles. These are the different excipients used in small volume parenterals. In aqueous vehicles, we can use water for injection, sterile water for injection, bacteriostatic water for injection, sterile bacteriostatic water for injection. Then if your formulation have an issue with the water or water for injection, then we can go for the non-aqueous vehicles like vegetable oils, right, and unsaturated and free fatty acids, containing unsaturated free fatty acids like you have peanut oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, sesame oil, olive oil, ethyl oleate, isopropyl myristate, soybean oil, and other kind of things. Then antibacterial agents, most popularly benzalkonium chloride is used. Then phenol or cresol is used, and chlorambutanol are also used. Percentages of these antibacterial agents should be remembered. Then buffers are also added like citrate acetate buffer, sodium benzoate, benzoic acid buffer, sodium tartarate, tartaric acid buffer, phosphate buffer, and all. Then tonicity adjusters, surfactants, chelating agents, and inert gases are used. Right. So this is the formulation of small volume parenterals. So let's see what is the general processing of parenterals, right, and preparation. So what you will do, you will have the cleaning of the containers and closure and equipments, right? Cleaning especially with the hot water in order to keep them sterile. See, the important thing here is everything should be done under aseptic conditions. Asepsis, without infections, right? So without any chance of infections, or without any pathogens or any kind of bacteria or anything. So that is aseptic conditions. We will discuss completely about the aseptic conditions in another class, but this thing should be done in aseptic processing, aseptic way, in aseptic conditions. That's why cleaning of the containers, closures, and equipments is very, very important step in the preparation of parenterals. Then collection of raw material, then preparation of parenteral products, then filtration is very important step, because pyrogens cannot be removed by sterilization procedures, by any other method. It may be autoclaving, it may be any kind of method. Pyrogens can be removed only through filtering them through membrane filters or bacterial proof filters. Then filling the preparation in the final containers, sealing the containers, sterilizing the containers. This is called as terminal sterilization, that is sterilizing after filling and after sealing of the containers. Then evaluating the parenteral preparations, labeling and packing, right? So before seeing the manufacturing of the container parenterals today, let's see some of the evolution parameters. Let's see what are different evolution parameters are available in small volume parenterals, or what evolution parameters should be done. It's very important, students, right? So what kind of evolution parameters basically we do? So generally speaking, what evolution parameters we will do? We will check for pyrogens. We will check for presence of pyrogens. Then we'll do sterility testing, right, through membrane filters and direct inoculation methods. Then we will go for the clarity test, and we will check for presence of particulate matter. Pyrogen test is basically done by through ways. One is lal test, other one is through rabbit test. Right? In rabbit test, what we'll do, we'll select four groups of experimental animals. Then we will inject our formulation into the ear vein, and then we will see whether the body temperature of rabbit is increasing or not. If the body temperature is increasing, what does it mean? It means your formulation contains pyrogens. If the body temperature of the rabbit is not increasing, it means your formulation doesn't contain pyrogens. Depending on the increase in the body temperature of the animal, you can find out whether your formulation contains pyrogens or not. Simple experiment. Next, you have the lal test, right? So in lal test, you will take you will take a horseshoe crab's blood, and you will inoculate it with your formulation. Basically, LAL stands for, like, it is limulocyte. Basically, it is amoebocyte lysate, right? Stimulus amoebocyte lysate test, right? So you will check whether the gelling is occurring the gelling is occurring or not. So depending on that, you can easily say that whether pyrogens are present or not. If gelling occurs, then depending on the intensity of the gel, we can find out whether pyrogens are there or not. Then in clarity test is done on the white and backgrounds, and you will test whether any particulate matter are present in it or not, right? So you will take white and black background, you will shake your ampule, and you will see limulus and amoebocyte lysate is the test of the lal test basically. Then you will see whether you will check behind the black and white backgrounds, and you will see whether any dissolved particles or undissolved particles or any particulates are present, or your formulation is clear or not. This is the clarity test, and presence of particulate matter can be find by this test. Then you will have leak test also. So whether you have sealed it properly or not, we will check it through leak test. So in leak test, what you will do, you will take your sealed ampules, and you will fill a container or the water can basically with a colored solution. You will insert your ampules, invert them at negative pressure, and if you see that the water, right, the colored water is entering into the ampules or vials, it means there is an imperfection or leakage in the sealing, right? This is the leakage test which we will do for pyrogens. And at last, we will go for the sterility testing also. In sterility testing, we will find out whether our formulation is sterile or not. So in sterility testing, first method is membrane filtration test, second method is direct inoculation method. Direct inoculation method is so easy. You will take the formulation, right? You will take some population and you will inoculate in the culture medium, and you will incubate it for 24 hours, and you will see whether any bacterial growth, colonies of bacteria is coming or not. If there is no growth of colonies, then it means after direct inoculation, it means your formulation is safe or sterile. If at all any growth is there, then it means your formulation contains certain pathogens or bacteria, and it is not sterilized. Membrane filtration test, you will take your formulation to be tested, and you will filter it through membrane filtrate, and you will take that membrane and you will inoculate that particular membrane, right? Then if you find the growth, right, of bacterial colonies, it means the formulation is not sterile, right? And in other case, if you don't find any kind of growth, then that formulation is sterile. So these are the different quality control tests commonly done for both small and or even for the large volume parenterals. What are those? We'll go for the pyrogen test, we'll go for the sterility test, we'll go for the clarity test, that is presence of particulate matter, and we'll go for the leak test. These four are very important quality control tests for parenterals. Okay, students, did you got it? Any issue?